Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out People of Reddit. Story 1. Elbow me without apologizing. Enjoy getting your shoes stepped on. So this happened today. I was at a theme park for an event and it was extremely crowded. Everyone was craning their necks to watch the show and so was I, despite having paid VIP tickets. As I'm rather short, 157 centimeters, I had to watch the show between the gaps of a tall couple in front of me. As the guy shifted, he elbowed my chest accidentally and it hurt. It would have been fine if he had apologized. But he didn't. I knew he was aware that he had elbowed someone as he briefly turned back. So my petty ass decided to take revenge. As I was wearing a pair of rather heavy platform boots, I shifted my foot forward and then accidentally stepped the back of his shoe. He turned around immediately. I pretended to not notice and continued to watch my show. I enjoyed the rest of my time at the theme park. Story 2. I must have picked it up from you, father. Here's a short tidbit from when I was a young child. I'm the oldest child and have a younger sister, let's call her Eliza. Eliza became a bit of a potty mouth after she started school. My father complained that it was my fault, and that Eliza must have picked it up from me. I had to nip this in the bud. I cannot be held accountable for every single transgression of my sister. So I came up with a petty plan. I purposely dropped a pen in front of my father, and swore in frustration. Hey, you don't have to swear, my father remarked. Sorry, I said, I must have picked it up from you. I'm surprised that it actually worked. My father stopped blaming me for Eliza's wrongdoings from then on, instead he would just talk to Eliza directly. Thankfully, my father had insight, and was not the kind of person who would discipline me for talking back to him. Story 3. Bagpipes while hungover. Coming right up. While in college I lived in a 4-room suite. It was tiny, but that's another story. We were all studious and didn't tend to stay up very late. We were across from the party room up all night making lots of noise and drinking. Wandering over in pajamas with nice requests didn't seem to make much difference to this noise. So early one Sunday morning, we broke out the bagpipe record. It was awful and I can't imagine how much more awful with a hangover. They were a bit more thoughtful about the noise after that. Story 4. Whole street laughing at local thief. Years ago I owned a laundromat on a busy metered street with only on-street parking available. I owned multiple locations and had a few maintenance trucks for the help to service my location plus property I owned here and there. For whatever reason I had to leave one of my trucks in a parking spot in front of my store overnight. Next morning we found someone had stolen the battery. Worse, had cut out the radiator as well, rendering the truck immobile. We called police. They came, took a report, and then wrote me an expired meter ticket and told me to get the truck towed or keep feeding the meter. Thank you very much. Anyway, word filters in that a certain person was seen that night fiddling with my truck. He lived in a boarding house down the street and worked the street daily with a stolen shopping cart scavenging for scrap metal. He had a non-working truck parked in front of his building and sure enough, my shit was in the bed of his truck. I just took my stuff back. This guy was a regular customer of my laundromat and we were always friendly, so I was shocked this guy would do this to me. This was a pretty tight-knit area so everyone soon knew what happened. I never confronted him. Well, a few days later he came in to do his laundry. 2 top loaders worth. Pretty much all the clothes he had, I suspect. As usual he would load up, start the washers, and take off down the street to the local coffee shop. This day, some sob came in while he was gone and stole all his clothes, leaving him with only the clothes he was wearing. I told him we didn't see a thing, laundromat was not responsible for unattended clothes. 4 days he walked around the neighborhood bitching about some asswipe stealing his clothes from the laundromat. Everybody had a hard time keeping a straight face. Story 5. Fake hooker bills. Some flashy middle-aged guy knocked me off my bicycle. I was shook up and scraped up pretty bad. He was nice enough to let me sit in his car while he went and bought some first aid supplies to patch me up. He also offered to reimburse me for fixing my bike. Because of that I agreed not to call the cops for an accident report. But when I called him weeks later on the home phone number he'd given me, to get the money, he denied everything and told me not to call again. Okay. So I had my girlfriend call back during the day. His wife answered. Hello, I'm calling from Platinum Escorts about a bounced check. Wife was like, nah, not my Joe. So my GF patiently described his expensive car down to the mirror ornaments, and explained to her how he picked up the girls in it. That convinced her. How much was the check? She asked. $1,200, was the reply. She screamed, I'm gonna fucking kill him. Story 6. My brother's smuffy Christmas revenge against me. Growing up, there were 6 kids in our family. Money was tight, so we were all encouraged to work for our pocket money from a very early age, and each kid got their own bank account to save up for big ticket items like bikes or roller skates. We all guarded our bank acts like squirrels perched on a hoard of nuts, so having to part with large amounts, in our eyes, at Christmas to buy gifts for everyone was especially painful. Then one year, the oldest boys got the brilliant idea for the kids to draw names. That way, they explained, we only had to buy one present instead of 5. We all loved the idea and worked out 2 hard-set rules. 1. No mean or junky presents. The gift had to be nice, kind and something the other kid would really like. 2. Absolutely, not ever, don't even think about doing it, no peeking. This worked out great and continued on for several years until the Christmas I was 10. That year, I had discovered Smurfs. I watched the cartoon religiously every Saturday morning. I read the comic strip, collected Smurf stickers, wore Smurfs on my clothes. I even went around saying things were just Smurfy LMAO. To say I was obsessed is an understatement. That year, we gathered on the first day of December with 6 slips of folded paper in Dad's ashtray and drew names. My name, that year, was drawn by my second oldest brother, who snorted, laughed and said, "That's easy." And so the Christmas countdown began. The tree went up, the house was filled with sweet smells of baking while Rudolph and Frosty pranced across the TV screen. Myself and brother number 4 as the 2 youngest were practically vibrating in anticipation. Then one day about 2 weeks before the big day, a package appeared under the tree with my name on it. To wafer from bro number 2. I squeezed it. It was soft, I hugged it, lumpy. It had no smell, no sound when I shook it. I was on fire with curiosity. I remembered our rule of no peeking, sighed, and put it back. But it was never far from my mind. No, sir. There it sat, glowing softly in the reflection of the tree lights. It seemed to beckon me like a tinsel-covered siren's song. Every day, I picked it up, gave it a squish and tried to guess what was inside. Then one day, as I sat by the tree, my little fingers took on a mind of their own and tore a tiny hole in the corner. I gasped and looked around. Nobody saw. Phew. Well, I reasoned. It's already ripped, might as well peek. I peered inside and saw blue fuzz. I saw a big nose. And a pink dress. Brother number 2 had gotten me a Smurf. And not just any Smurf, he got me Smurfette in a pink dress. I gleefully looked at the gift and then I saw it. A hole. Where no hole had been just 10 minutes earlier. I flushed with guilt. I had broken the rule. I had to hide the evidence of my crime. I quickly found some tape and slapped a bunch on the incriminating corner, then put the present in the back of the tree. Now nobody would know. I was safe. The days ticked by, one at a time. I thought about my new Smurfette. I dreamed about combing her hair. Anticipation filled my very being. Then, finally, Christmas morning. We ate breakfast, and I thought about Smurfette. We turned on Nana Muscari on the hi-fi and I thought about Smurfette. At last, It was time. Never had gifts been so eagerly opened as I waited for the one. Then brother number 2 handed me a package and said it was from him. I was confused. This one had different paper. It was round and hard, not soft and lumpy. I pulled off the paper and found a pink plastic piggy bank. I looked at the piggy, then looked towards the back of the tree, but there was no lumpy package. I was puzzled and beginning to feel a bit cheated. Brother number 2 grinned and said, I had something else for you, but somebody peeked, so I took it back to the store. He knew I peeked. He knew that I knew that he knew I peeked. I sighed, resigning myself to life without Smurfette, and thanked him for the piggy bank. Funny thing about that bank. I used it for years until one of its plastic seams finally gave out and it fell apart. I doubt Smurfette would have lasted as long. Story 7. Petty Revenge Mail. I'm not sorry even now, more than 30 years later. When I was dating my wife, her parents were horrible. Specifically her mother. She listened into our landline phone calls, would unplug hers and plug it back in while we were speaking. She disliked my friends because I wasn't more particular with who I associated. Not the right backgrounds or right parents. And I did local theater, so I must be gay. She started spreading rumors about me and gossiping about my clothes and jewelry wearing, my hair and colorful choices in shoes. But I was always the nice guy. And I didn't want to make things worse for the girl I loved. But that day, her mom had been bad-mouthing me to people who immediately shared her vile words. It happened to be the largest home and garden show in the area where my friends shared her meanness with me. So I signed her up for estimates and in-person meetings at every single booth in the home and garden show. I requested more information and I scheduled in-home demos. I gave their home number and address and work numbers. It took a full day to sign up for everything. I never told a soul. Interesting though. All the drama at home with all the calls and vendors, she laid off of me and things got much better between us. Story 8. The landlord should have just paid the ticket. Hi everyone. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. I was telling this story to one of my friends and they suggested that it would fit here and I agreed, so here goes. I apologize for the length, I had to set the scene. Enjoy. This takes place back in the summer of 2019. I had just graduated college and me and 2 of my high school friends decided to move in together. We started looking for apartments and ended up finding one that was in a great location in a big city and not too far from all of our jobs. Well, we go to meet up with the landlord. I had to drive in from the suburbs to see the place, and the landlord gave me a temporary parking permit, very nice of him, to use since this area of the city is all permit parking. This is key for later. Aside from some squeaky floorboards, it was perfect. It had 3 above-sized rooms with a giant balcony, and we were the top floor, second floor. Overall we were very happy and signed the lease that day. Fast forward a week from the signing and we were beginning to move in. I still had to commute from the suburbs, so I loaded up my car with the intent of staying the night to move everything in. After all, I hadn't used the temporary parking permit the landlord gave me when we were looking at the apartment since it was a quick 15 minutes thing. Well, lo and behold, I come out to my car the next morning after moving in and I see that my car has a big fat ticket on the windshield. I look at the ticket and under the reason it states parking permit expired. Now you may be asking yourself, OP, why didn't you check the permit for an expiration date? And that's a good question. Likely because I was in a rush and just slapped it on my car and didn't think much more about it. Looking at this ticket, and reading more into the reason section, I discover that the parking permit that the gracious landlord had bestowed upon me had actually expired in 2017, 2 years ago. Now I think of myself as a reasonable person, and if this parking permit had expired a day or 2 ago, or even the day after I was given the permit, then I would have gone ahead and paid the $70 ticket myself. That, however, was not the case, and I wholeheartedly blamed the landlord since I would have still gotten a ticket had I used the permit while I was seeing the apartment. So, I reach out to the landlord and explained the situation, and asked for my rent to be credited $70, since it was his fault he gave me a 2-year expired permit. To no one's surprise he refused, called me names, and said that his obligation to provide me a working, LOL, permit ended the day of the apartment showing. Long story short, after some back and forth, he agreed to pay half of the ticket and credit it to my rent. Yay! Except I wasn't satisfied, and as a fresh grad, whose job didn't start for another 3 weeks, I had nothing but time on my hands. So, bring on the petty revenge. For the next week I started plotting how I could get the rest of my money back from the ticket debacle with my landlord. But how do you get your money back and not get caught? My dear reader, the answer laid in the washing and drying machines. In big cities it is common for multi-family apartments to have out-of-unit washer and dryers that all the floors use. Ours was located in the basement. Not to mention they are usually not free, as was our case, $1.75 per load, per washer/dryer. Well, one day, while I was plotting, and shoving my hard-earned quarters into the washer/dryer, I had a light bulb moment. What if I could not pay for laundry? I would get my money back and no one would know. So I rushed back upstairs, did my research on how these machines work. When you select your washer/dryer setting, put the quarters in, and push the lever in, there's a switch that gets hit at the back, and boom, the machine starts working. So what did I do? I simply looked up the serial number and manufacturer of the machines, called said manufacturer, impersonated some random landlord saying I misplaced my key fob for the safe box, where the quarters and lever are, on the machines, and would like to know the serial number for the key fob so that I could order a new one. The person I talked to didn't hesitate, gave me the serial number, and I ordered the key fob with expedited shipping off some third-party website that day for $16. I was so excited the day the key arrived that I almost fell down the stairs running to the laundry room. And did my plan work? Without a single problem. I brought some laundry with me, picked my washing settings, and then opened the safe box exposing all the collected quarters, wires, and switch. Now, I could have taken the quarters, but I didn't want the landlord to get suspicious. So, I decided to leave them be and just have my access to free laundry by pressing the lever and putting the safe box back on the machines. Now you might be wondering, how much money did you actually save? Well, I kept track of every single time I used the machines. I wanted to know how much money the landlord was losing. And I wanted to know bad. So at the end of the year lease, I ended up using the washer 68 times, the dryer 70 times, and at $1.75 each time, it came out to be $241.50. You might be thinking to yourself, OP, that's only $200 or so, couldn't you have done better? And you would be right. And I did do better. I ended up letting my roommates in on my secret halfway through the lease, and then ended up leaving them the key after I had moved out. Did I mention they stayed at that apartment for another 2 years? So, Mr. Landlord, you should have just paid the ticket. Edits. Typos/spelling errors. Wow. This definitely got a lot more attention than I thought it would. I've definitely had fun reading through some of these. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.